According to a New York Times piece, America is in grave danger because of the events of January 6th. We've forgotten them and we've failed to act upon them to a tangible degree in which the author of this piece, Every Day is January 6th, thinks that we should be acting. While some may argue or think that the riots were incited or allowed or even over-dramatized, the author of Every Day is January 6th argues that the rioting which occurred is a direct derivative of a doomed democracy. I'll give you that one more time. It's a direct derivative of a doomed democracy, right? So the main claim here would be that, and this is a quote I'm dragging right out of the article, in the months and years to come, Americans of all stripes at every level, not simply once every 4 years, but today and tomorrow and the next day, must mobilize to win elections and help protect the basic functions of democracy. All right, that got a little switched, all right, so don't quote it, but that's what we're talking about here. That basically, to me, comes out of survival of our democracy depends on a constant remembrance and reaction to January 6th and the events that occurred. All right, so let's break that down a little bit, okay? We got 3 subclaims that I want to talk about. The first one would be that the Republican lawmakers knew what was going to happen and heard about it, but failed to act on that, failed to do anything about it. And that would be, of course, our first subclaim building up to this democracy's in trouble, right? And that would be a claim of fact. The idea that Republicans knew about it, that's something observable. That's something that we can look at and find emails and documentation of. Whether or not that was provided thoroughly in this article, who's to say? Where to say, really. But that's a claim of fact. That's an observable thing. Republicans did not really act on this knowledge that they knew about. Subclaim 2, we're going to talk about how Republicans are writing bills to hurt the democratic process. Okay, a quote comes out of there, and it says, some bills would change the rules to make it easier for lawmakers to reject votes. Right, now that right there is a claim of fact. And that's an example, too. And the author cites other examples. We don't necessarily get to hear about them, but it's alluded to. So we're given more fact. These are examples of how democracy is getting pushed a little bit, right? Subclaim 3. It's our final jab at the Republicans here. The majority of Republicans don't believe that the voting process is fair. It's a whole paragraph there, and even a little bit more talking about how this is true. The majority there, statistically, would be defined as anything over 50%. We don't get the actual number, but we get a majority. Don't believe it's fair. Then we get 1/3 of Republicans approve of political violence. Where that number comes from, too, it's not necessarily known. But we're given stats and we're given facts based on how Republicans feel about the voting process and how they feel about political violence. Okay? So then the author says, put those two together and you've got a recipe for extreme danger. Of course, that would be a claim of value there. Extreme danger. Even recipe. I think it's a hard line to try to make that into a fact. But yeah, we get a little bit of value there. And value kind of shows up at different points in this, right? The main claim, too, being that democracy is doomed and in trouble and we need to mobilize. That would be value there. But, of course, the we need to mobilize, that's our claim of policy. And note that I didn't make that our main claim because we don't really get to hear too much about how to mobilize. We just hear why we should and how we need to and why we need to remember January 6th. So just keep that in mind here. To conclude this, the author puts a little bit of blame on Democrats. And when I say Democrats, that's a really, really specific S at the end there, because 2 Democrats are really the only ones that are to blame, according to the author. And that's Joe Manchin and, of course, our girl Kirsten Sinema, sorry. And as we know, with a bunch of things, and these January 6th things included, they don't like to vote unanimously with the rest of the party. So, Democrats are to blame too. And then we get just a further extension of those value claims that we got in the beginning. So, lots of claims were made. But I chose those three that build up to the democracy is doomed and in trouble, because I feel like that's the main point of this editorial. And really, when I've read all that and when I come out of it, I tend to digest it as this. We've got corrupt politicians, we've got unfair voting laws, and we've got an electoral system that people don't understand and don't really trust. And I kind of want to point it back at the author, point it at you, point it at anyone who's willing to listen, and say, does this sound like new and strictly Republican issues, or do these sound like American flaws and issues that can point back to our society as a whole? So, you know, that's what I'll point to there, and you can chew on that if you'd like. I also want to say here that, you know, in this sort of context, one could assume that blame might be the only thing moving out in DC. That's my editorial. That's my Tucker Carlson impression there, I guess. I hope my noise wasn't too distracting in the back here. I'm in beautiful Saginaw, Texas, with the Fort Worth behind me. But yeah, thank you.